feeling even warmer than yesterday, highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius. Little change as we go through this evening and overnight. It is going to stay settled. A lot of the cloud will actually clear away, so clear skies for many of us, though some low cloud pushing in from the North Sea across some eastern parts, and elsewhere a few pockets of mist and fog are possible. Temperatures generally dropping to high single figures or low double digits. We start Saturday on a fine note for many places, though quite cloudy towards eastern parts. Again, any mist and fog will quickly burn back, and then once more another largely fine day for many of us. Just watch out for the potential for some showers to develop over high ground towards northern England, and some of these could be heavy. Temperatures even higher than today for some of us, highs of around 25, possibly 26 Celsius. On Sunday, there's the risk of some showery rain, which could turn heavy, possibly thundery, developing across western parts. Further east, however, it's likely to stay largely dry. Again, plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures could get even higher with highs of 26 or 27.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Mersey ferry commuter sailings are cancelled this morning because of low tides, with a replacement bus running between Seacombe and Hamilton Square. On the M1 in Buckinghamshire, the inside lane's closed southbound, or someone's broken down just before junction 14 at Milton Keynes, causing queues. On the M25 from Essex into Kent, there are clockwise queues after traffic was stopped to move a breakdown on the QE2 bridge. Queues start a couple miles after junction 29 for the A127. In Kent, the A2 is closed westbound from the M25 to Dartford Heath after an accident causing queues. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed clockwise at junction 5 for the M26 after a lorry broke down, with queues back beyond junction 5, and long delays too on the M26 towards the M25, not helped by roadworks and a breakdown. And in Bridgend, the A4064 is closed in both directions between Pantigog and Pontaril after an accident causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is tough love. You're going to take your medicine. It's going to be good for you. You may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported, and not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
Good morning, it's 9:30. It's Friday the 10th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Nana Akweer, and Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you. Labour's migration plan. Sir Keir Starmer sets out his strategy to tackle the small boat crossings this morning, and it involves relying on closer EU cooperation. Wonder how that's going to go. We're going to have all the latest shortly.
It feels like a little bit of naivety, but who knows? Now, more Tory turncoats, that's according to Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting. He's spoken to other Tory MPs, that's what he said, who are considering defecting to Labour.
And warnings from the Bank of England's chief economist Hugh Pill that soaring migration is fueling Britain's housing crisis.
Well, who knew? And then there is some good news, by the way. The UK is officially out of recession as the economy grew 0.6% between January and March.
And who'd have thought, Nana? Mass uncontrolled migration equals housing crisis.
Housing shortage,
If
really?
you speak to the young students, though, or the young Gen Zers,
Yes.
1 second they're advocating open borders, anyone and everyone's welcome. The next day they're complaining they can't get homes.
Well, I think it's the thing that Holly Valance said, isn't it? That you start off when you're very young on the left with this wonderful open idea. As you get older, you realise what rubbish ideas they are.
Well, the problem for the Tories is, normally, I agree with that, normally you'd grow up and you'd have things to conserve, families, children, homes. The problem for the Conservatives now in the future is people don't have those things. We're not having kids, they're not buying homes, they have nothing to conserve. So are we destined for decades and decades of Labour? Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say, all that and plenty more to come. But first, your news headlines with Sophia.
Ben, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Labour is set to launch plans to tackle the small boat crisis today. Sir Keir Starmer will unveil proposals for stronger new counter-terror powers that will effectively treat people smugglers like terrorists. His plans will be supported by around 1,000 additional officers recruited by MI5. To do this, Labour will spend £75 million, equating to a year of what would have been spent on sending migrants to Rwanda. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper set out Labour's plan.
Go after the criminal gangs. They would have new counter-terror style powers and also new resources to be able to recruit many hundreds, up to 1,000 new investigators, cross-border police, because we have to go after the criminal gangs. They are undermining border security and putting lives at risk with these dangerous boat crossings, and that's why this action is so urgently needed.
The UK is no longer in recession, according to official figures. The ONS has published the latest GDP statistics, which show the economy grew in the first 3 months of the year. The economy grew better than expected by 0.6% between January and March, according to the Office for National Statistics. And Israel singer has insisted the Eurovision Song Contest in Sweden remains safe for everyone amid protests against her participating. Eden Golan qualified for the final of the Eurovision Song Contest on Saturday, despite being booed throughout the rehearsals and live events. Protesters want Israel banned in the same manner Russia was for its involvement in a controversial conflict. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning to you. 9:34, Ben and Nana on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. So big news this morning. Sir Keir Starmer is going to be introducing his big idea to stop the boats.
Yes.
I've got my thoughts on it. It just sounds like it's going to replace the so-called war on drugs, which obviously we all know is a massive failure because you deal with one dealer or you smash one gang, there's plenty of others who are willing to take their places. So, yeah, well, let's hear about...
A bit naive, though, isn't it? But Labour will sort of launch their plans, apparently, to tackle the boat crisis. And this, I thought, what he's saying, I don't know. I think Rwanda's working. There's elements of it that are working. Why would you get rid of it? You keep that, then bring your plans in. It doesn't make sense. Seems foolhardy.
So he's going to unveil, Sir Keir Starmer, stronger new counter-terror powers that will effectively treat people like... people smugglers like terrorists.
And his plans will be supported by around about 1,000 additional officers, so more bureaucracy by MI5. And, of course, they'll scrap the Rwanda plan, which we mentioned altogether, which seems madness if it's working, but, you know.
But can either party tackle the small boat crisis, the Tories or Labour? Joining us now is political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and political correspondent at The Spectator, James Hill. Good morning to you both. Kevin, let's go to you first. As I was just saying to Nana, it kind of feels like Sir Keir Starmer's pending announcement will be similar to the war on drugs, where you kind of ignore the people actually crossing the channel and you go after the smuggling gangs. But you crack one gang, another is just going to appear. it. All the meanwhile, the boats will continue crossing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive challenge. You know, the government has wrestled with this for a long time, and yet this year the number of crossings is up on last year, despite the Rwanda bill being passed. So, yeah, Labour have obviously made it very clear since the very beginning of the Rwanda policy that they were against it. They will scrap it if they win the next election. And, yeah, now they've come up with their own plan. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't say it's a silver bullet. I don't think a silver bullet on this problem actually exists. I guess it's worth a try. And if you're going to cancel Rwanda altogether, then you've got to come up with something. I just wonder whether there'll be more detail in the actual speech. What's been trailed still seems a little bit thin to me.
James, what's your thoughts on it? Do you think Keir Starmer is on the right path with his plan?
Well, I mean, you know, the Labour likes to talk about smashing the criminal gangs as if the Conservatives aren't also committed to that. You know, I think, look, we can have a discussion around the powers and additional funding that goes towards that. I mean, that's, you know, it's difficult to argue against that. But, you know, the idea, for instance, that the government isn't committed to doing that, you can argue not doing enough, but they're certainly trying to tackle the people smugglers, is, you know, a fallacy. I think the interesting thing, really, is the way in which Keir Starmer, with all these different problems, tends to come up with the idea for a sort of new body. So, for instance, he's announced this new border security commander, new force. I mean, that's not too dissimilar to, I think, what Rishi Sunak announced 2 years ago with the Small Boats Operational Command. So I'm really not too sure, other than Rwanda, what the real substantive differences are going to be in an election. So as Kevin says, we need to see more detail. But I think it's an interesting choice of Keir Starmer to always go for a kind of new body. I think in some ways he's a bit of sort of Mr. Blobby. He's a very politician who likes the blob in the kind of way in which he chooses to address these difficult issues. And I think that's a definite breach with the Conservatives. So I'd be interested to see how that will work out.
Well, yes, so...
Bureaucracy, isn't it? More bureaucracy, more people. 1,000 more people, he's saying.
Yeah, well, Dominic Cummings wrote an interesting column today about the fact that he reckons Sir Keir Starmer will just be ordered around by the civil service. He just loves being told what to do. But, Kevin, Sir Keir, in his speech later today, we're going to bring that to you live just after around 10 o'clock, he will say that they're going to rely on closer cooperation with the European Union. But we already send France $500 million a year to stop the dinghies. Some great exposés by the likes of the Sun newspaper have shown that, in actual fact, all the workers meant to be stopping boats on the French beaches are down at the local working men's club sinking shots. So we can't trust the French. The rest of the EU, let's be frank, hate us. How is the Labour government going to change that?
Well, I guess he will hope that European...
Oh, I think we've lost you. You're frozen.
Track record. Clearly, he was against Brexit. He campaigned... Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back on. Carry on. We're listening.
Sorry. Yeah. So they'll look at his track record of opposing Brexit, of working to try and get a second referendum, if you remember, when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary. And they will think maybe this is a guy that we can work with in a way that we can't work with a Conservative government who introduced Brexit, with a Prime Minister who supported Brexit. I guess we've got to hope that there'll be just a change of vibe, really, between Europe and the UK if there is a Labour government. But again, it does put you in the hands of the EU. It's pretty much up to them whether they want to work with us. And you make a very good point there. I remember last year when Rishi Sunak struck this new deal with France, and yet here we are, as I said earlier, the number of crossings are going up, and yet we're sending an awful lot of money to the French government. So, yeah,
but you could say
far,
that.
Nothing has worked.
You could say that
yes.
about the relationship with Boris Johnson and Macron and the French, but you can't really say that about Rishi Sunak. He's got a good relationship with the French already. I have a feeling that Keir Starmer is slightly deluded on this plan, because it sounds to me like a lot more bureaucracy. You're talking about costs. How much will 1,000 more people cost to do this so-called job? And what is it that they're going to do? And then what about the people that are here? Does that mean there's an amnesty for the people that are here? And won't he need a third country anyway? I mean, that's to either of you. James, I mean, won't he need it? He'll need it.
Well, the danger is, of course, Labour likes to say we're going to clear the asylum backlog. But, of course, that obviously means, are you going to accept those people? If you accept them, the Conservatives will say, well, that is an effective amnesty for illegal migration, for coming here illegally. And if you don't accept them, where are you going to send them? And this is the kind of big issue with migration, which is that it's not sort of, trying to stop people before they arrive. It's once they're here, what do you actually do with them? And I think Labour will have to make those difficult choices about either choosing to give an effective amnesty or choosing where to send these people. I think you touched on a really interesting point just slightly before this, which is about Europe. And of course, I think it's worth the Conservatives keep making the point. Europe is having this a lot worse than us. There are a lot more crossings to the Mediterranean, to Italy. So my question is, why on earth would the Europeans want any kind of deal that would involve, them taking our people, our rivals, but we don't take any of theirs? I think that they have it much worse. And I think actually what is so striking about this is that, the UK isn't sort of an outlier on this. We are acting with the same tandem as Europe on this. They want to get a harsher crackdown on asylum and migration because this is a worldwide phenomenon. So I think that, it's a mistake to think, we can have cooperation with Europe. Europe, if anything, is having it worse than us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite right. And as I have said, Europe and the EU, most countries hate us. They can't forgive us for leaving their gravy train club and having independent thought of wanting to go by ourselves. I just can't stress it enough. So why would they want to help us with our migration problem? I just don't get it. Kevin, let me ask you about something slightly different. Wes Streeting this morning, the Shadow Health Secretary, he reckons Labour is in discussions with more Tory MPs willing to defect, of course, off the back of Natalie Elphicke down in Dover, who will be with Sir Keir Starmer at his speech later this morning. Is he just calling the Tories bluff? Do you think there are Tory MPs lining up to cross the floor?
I think there are. We wrote a story last week, actually, saying that there was about a handful were in discussions with Labour. I was told at the time, though, it was hush-hush, so I'm quite surprised that Wes Streeting has just come out and revealed it. But yeah, I think that is true. I think we've got maybe 6 months to the next election. I wouldn't be surprised if we get at least another one defector. I can't tell you who it might be, but yeah, there are definitely discussions going on. Whether those are MPs who are already standing down, or whether there are Tory MPs who are looking at their majorities and thinking, well, unless I switch to Labour, I'm not coming back again. Who knows? But yeah, I think those discussions are, without a doubt, they are taking place. James,
do you know who they may be? Can you spill the beans?
Well, given that the last defector was a hard-right Eurosceptic member of the ERG, I'm just glad Mark Francois has come out and said he's not going to be defecting. I think at GBNews you need to check with Jacob Rees-Mogg. Anyone's welcoming Keir Starmer's Labour Party, apart from real socialists.
Well, they were talking about Nigel Farage, weren't they, yesterday?
It's rubbish. He's not going to do that.
I think Nigel Farage, can give a good speech, so I'm not sure how many of those are found in the Labour Party. But I think it's one to watch. Certainly, Labour wants to play up this narrative. Of course they do, and cause havoc with the enemy side.
Well, why would anybody? To be fair, Wes Streeting, he's the guy that called people who support Suzanne Hall white supremacists. I remember his tweet many years ago about Jan Moore, the Daily Mail columnist, talking about her being under a train. He has apologised for that. But this is somebody who's made comments like that. I was actually talking to somebody as I was getting ready today in the dressing room and saying the comment that he wrote about Suzanne Hall, have any of you, or would any of you ever dare tweet something like that? I don't know anyone that would. So I wouldn't take anything that Wes Streeting says. I'd take everything he says with a pinch of salt. I don't believe a word he says. Do you? I mean, would you ever tweet anything like that?
I was a big fan of Wes Streeting up until about around a month or so ago when he stood at the dispatch box. Kevin, I'm not sure what you make of this. He stood at the dispatch box with his Labour MPs behind him, laughing at the fact that NatCon event in Brussels was being shut down. A total attack on free speech, which anyone from the right, if it happened to their adversaries on the left, would call out straight away. I don't agree with you, but I respect and will fight for your right to say it. But Wes Streeting giggled like a juvenile schoolboy, and then, of course, he had the tweeting incident as well.
I just don't know what's wrong with him.
Yeah, no, I think that was a mistake, I have to say. Yeah, you can absolutely just say you can not agree with someone, you can not agree with what they say, but, sending in the police to shut them down, I think that is clearly a step too far, and it's not something that, regardless of your political affiliation, is not something that you should possibly support.
James?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wes Streeting is very talented in lots of ways, but sometimes he's a bit intemperate with his language, and I think he got a bit carried away at the dispatch box, and I think that tweet was poorly judged.
But should we look deeper into it? Yeah. Because Sir Keir Starmer says the Labour Party has changed, but clearly they haven't. I mean, it's almost student gutter politics, that kind of thing. And I spoke to a couple of Labour MPs since and said, do you back... I mean, Jonathan Ashworth, earlier this week, I said, do you back or condemn what Wes Streeting says? And he said it was just made in the heat of the moment. Well...
Why is that acceptable? That's not acceptable. Angela Rayner told... What was that whole spiel that Angela Rayner said? Homophobic, misogynist, banana republic, Etonian... What was it? Racist scum. This is... If I used that language on my Twitter feed about anyone, I would be fired. I think I'd be fired, wouldn't you? They would be
cancelled, yeah.
They'd be talking to me seriously about those sort of wordings. I don't get why these Labour MPs in particular are just getting away with anything.
I think one day...
I think Angela Rayner, sorry, James, I think Angela Rayner was severely criticised and I think was quite chastened. And she will not be repeating that again, that's for sure. I think that was a very ill-judged remark, and I'm pretty sure that she deeply regrets it now. But it will obviously be brought up again, no doubt, during the election campaign. I dare say, it's not the type of language that we want to see in our political debate.
But that's only because they got caught out there. That's because they got caught out. This is what they're like, and some of them are prepared to say it out loud. So I'm just very concerned about some of these politicians.
Last word to you, James.
Yeah, I think one day Wes Streeting is going to be standing for Labour leader, so he just needs to watch some of the comments, I'd say.
Interesting. OK, Kevin Schofield, James Haley, thanks very much. Now, I'm not sure if you're a fan or if you've even heard of the Netflix phenomenon Baby Reindeer. Have you seen it?
I've heard about it because people have been talking about it, but I just can't bring myself to watch anything weird.
It's all kicking off because the real-life Martha, who was a stalker based in the series, she has finally revealed herself. She spoke out last night, and there's some very, very interesting details that she shared. We're going to get stuck into that just after the break. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams. It's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently, it's been made from organic fruits growing in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it, I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her product. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So why did they go?
Has gone through the roof.
Why did they go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying we don't want your jam. We're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth style, New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess, so she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with a cooking show as well on Netflix. She's coming out with a cooking show. And she's, I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking. But I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So, are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist? Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
Friday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Lee Anderson's Real World at 7. At 8, it's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. 9:50, Ben and Anna with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Thank you for your emails. They're flying in. Let's get stuck into a couple. David, good morning to you. You said, if we didn't have mass uncontrolled immigration, we wouldn't have a housing crisis. Is it only now they realised it? Good point. I mean, same with...
We've been saying it. It's quite obvious, isn't it, that that's what would happen if you have lots of people coming in and you don't have enough places to put them. That's what we keep asking, where are you going to put these people? But nobody ever appears to be able to answer the question. But lots of these charities and all these so-called do-gooders all want to help. And then Alistair says, Capital Economics report that the indications are the economy grew robustly in April as well. If this is true, growth in Q2 will be similar than Q1, as the benefits of the national insurance reduction and rises in state pension, minimum wage and benefits will not be felt until May. Add-in wages rising faster than inflation, and the outlook is surprisingly rosy. That's nice, Alistair.
And Keith, you say, I sincerely hope it's not only the Rwanda plan that's finally abandoned. France should receive no more money either. Good point. Right, let's move on to our next guest.
Reindeer.
Netflix, big, massive show that hit the screens, of course, in the last week or so, Baby Reindeer. Where's the old scholar? There we go. It's basically a show about getting to the bottom of a mystery, a stalking mystery. The woman involved, a woman called Martha, she gave her first ever TV interview last night when she denied all allegations that she'd stalked this publican from London to the extent where she sent, allegedly, 41,000 emails. Take a look at this.
And we've had no apologies from Netflix or him or nothing. I mean, for someone who says he feels sorry for me, I've had no apology, and I have... This Martha character seems to have smashed up a bar, sexually assaulted him in a canal, been to prison. There are a number of other allegations there.
And none of that is true.
That's not true.
Wow, so she's denying it all. Well, joining us now is retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector and leading authority in stalking cases, Hamish Brown. Hamish, what do you make of that? She said that none of it's true.
Yes, good morning to you, well, both of you for that matter. Well, yes, of course, I did watch the Piers Morgan interview, and as sort of civil writs will be flying around, I'll choose my words very carefully. Netflix have gone ahead with this. They will have their sources and information. The lady, Fiona Harvey, she has denied everything. So we'll have to see where we go from here. Piers was quite clear with her to say if the information's there on the internet or social media, it will be found. And she refuted that she was involved in this at all. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I think the principle of the show, if you just talk in general terms, not pointing the finger at anyone whatsoever, what it did highlight was women stalking men. That's what the programme was about. That was the issue. Now, the overwhelming majority of cases, it's men stalking women. It's less to do with celebrities, incidentally. They make the headlines. It's ordinary people in the street. And also same-sex stalking, that's very important as well, and they must be taken seriously. Now, the programme showed, and we don't know how true it was, but the police not being very helpful and not getting it, that a woman could stalk a man. You saw what's wrong with that type of thing. And the other thing to be taken into account in stalking is very often the acts in isolation won't be a crime at all, like following or sending presents, quite inoffensive presents. But it is the totality or the circumstances that counts, and that's when it digs in. Again, we saw from the programme, the police the police officer saw one text message and said, well, that's not very threatening. It is the totality of it.
What should people do if they are being stalked, then? What's the best thing to do?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly keep a record of what's going on, how you felt about it, who was with you, if people were with you at the time, if notes or text messages or something like that are found. Keep them, just put them away. Yeah. You don't have to read it all, by the way, but just save those. And if you want, go and see the police.
Go to the police. Hamish, I'm going to have to cut you off, unfortunately, because we're running out of time. But save the evidence. Go to the police. A fascinating interview last night. And who knows who's telling the truth. In actual fact, some people think that the guy who made the series could also be a bit, off the scale a bit. Stick with us. We're going live to Sir Keir Starmer and his new small boats plan in just a sec. First, here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. The fine and often sunny weather many of us have had recently will continue for a little while yet. Yes, there are some mist and fog patches around first thing this morning, but these will quickly burn back because there'll be plenty of sunshine around. Lots of bright blue skies on offer as we head into the afternoon. There are a bit more cloud towards Shetland, a little bit of rain here and elsewhere, 1 or 2 showers possible. Most places staying dry and in the sunshine, feeling even warmer than yesterday. Highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius. Little change as we go through this evening and overnight. It is going to stay settled. A lot of the cloud will actually clear away, so clear skies for many of us, though some low cloud pushing in from the North Sea across some eastern parts, and elsewhere a few pockets of mist and fog are possible. Temperatures generally dropping to high single figures or low double digits. We start Saturday on a fine note for many places, though quite cloudy towards eastern parts. Again, any mist and fog will quickly burn back, and then once more another largely fine day for many of us. Just watch out for the potential for some showers to develop over high ground towards northern England, and some of these could be heavy. Temperatures even higher than today for some of us, highs of around 25, possibly 26 Celsius. On Sunday, there's the risk of some showery rain, which could turn heavy, possibly thundery, developing across western parts. Further east, however, it's likely to stay largely dry. Again, plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures could get even higher with highs of 26 or 27.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Mersey ferry commuter sailings are cancelled this morning because of low tide, so the replacement bus running between Seacombe and Hamilton Square. On the M1 in Buckinghamshire, the inside lane's closed southbound, or someone's broken down just before junction 14 at Milton Keynes, causing queues. On the M25 from Essex into Kent, there are clockwise queues after traffic was stopped to move a breakdown on the QE2 bridge. Queues start a couple miles after junction 29 for the A127. In Kent, the A2 is closed westbound from the M25 to Dartford Heath after an accident causing queues. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed clockwise at junction 5 for the M26 after a lorry broke down, with queues back beyond junction 5 and long delays too on the M26 towards the M25, not helped by roadworks and a breakdown. And in Bridgend, the A4064 is closed in both directions between Pantygog and Pontaril after an accident causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, 10th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and the lovely Nana Aquir.
Right, well, Labour's migration plans. Keir Starmer, he's about to set out his strategy in a matter of moments, how he's going to tackle the small boat crossings this morning. We'll bring that to you, and there'll also be a surprise appearance, apparently.
Apparently. Let's say it now. Natalie Elphicke, the MP who converted to Labour, she'll be speaking for the first time. Interesting to hear what she's going to have to say. Moving on, more Tory turncoats. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting claims he has spoken to other Tory MPs who are also considering defecting to Labour.
And of course, Eurovision is on high alert. Israel has it made it through to the final tomorrow, despite thousands of pro-Palestine protests wanting them removed from the competition.
And warnings from the Bank of England's chief economist, Hugh Pill, who says that soaring immigration is fuelling Britain's housing crisis. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And Trump on trial. Won't they leave this man alone and let him get on with what he's trying to do? As Donald Trump's third week of this hush money trial comes to a close, he blasts the judge as a disgrace. We'll stay tuned to find out why.
OK, so here it is. We're going to go live now to Kent, where Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is unveiling his small boats plan, and also Labour MP Natalie Elphicke. She's going to comment for the first time since defecting from the Tories to Labour. Here you go.
And looks to the future to build a Britain of hope, optimism, opportunity and fairness. A Britain everyone can be part of. Nowhere is Rishi Sunak's lack of delivery clearer than on the issue of small boats. They are failing to keep our borders safe and secure. Lives are being lost in the English Channel, while small boat arrivals are once again at record levels so far this year. It's clear that Rishi Sunak has failed to keep our borders secure and cannot be trusted. A fresh approach is needed. An approach that puts at its heart a commitment to border security, which tackles the criminal gangs behind the small boats crisis and saves lives. I'm delighted to be joined in Dover today by the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, and the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. And with that, I'll now hand over to Yvette.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Natalie. And it is significant to be here today with Natalie, who, as Dover's MP, has seen the consequences of dangerous boat crossings and has followed government policies in this area for many years and has concluded that Rishi Sunak's approach is not working and is supporting Labour's approach. We welcome Natalie to Labour. And we hope that across the country, people who did not vote Labour in the last election will be ready to support us this time, to deliver the change that Keir is leading and that our country so desperately needs. Dangerous boat crossings are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk. Just a few weeks ago, a 7-year-old girl was crushed to death in a smuggler boat, one of 5 people who died that day. And we've seen the sickening images of violence on the French coast as gangs push more and more people into these flimsy dinghies, gangs that are part of a network of organised criminals making hundreds of millions of pounds in profits, networks that stretch from here in the UK right across Europe through Kurdistan to the money markets of Kabul and beyond. And those networks have taken root along our borders over the last 5 years. We cannot let them get away with it. And that is why we have been working with and hearing from national security experts, border security experts, looking at the experiences of successful security operations and approaches around terrorism in the past. Why we welcome the support from former counter-terror chief Neil Basu for the work that we are doing, and why too we have drawn on Keir's experience, going after terror gangs and networks as Director of Public Prosecutions and in Northern Ireland. We cannot just stand by while our border security is undermined and lives are put at risk. And instead of the years of Conservative gimmicks, it is time to get a grip. So before we hear from Keir about the new proposals that Keir is setting out as leader of the Labour Party today, let me hand over now to Labour's candidate for the next election here in Dover, someone who has himself worked for the National Crime Agency and has deep experience on intelligence and cooperation to go after the criminal gangs. Welcome, Mike Tapp.
Thank you, everybody. So my name is Mike Tapp, and I am Labour's candidate for Dover, Deal and the Villages. I'm a former soldier. I've served in Afghanistan and Iraq with a specialist unit, at the National Crime Agency and then the Ministry of Defence, where I spent much of my time in counter-terrorism, playing my part to protect the British people.
Look, we'll bring Keir Starmer to you directly as soon as he starts speaking, but joining us now in the studio is Home and Security Editor Mark White. Listen, Mark, what are we expecting from Keir Starmer in a few moments?
Well, the big headline announcement will, of course, be the creation of this Border Security Command, which Labour believes will give authorities the kind of power they need to go after the criminal gangs who are pushing these small boats out into the English Channel. However, you know, we've already had a reorganisation announced by Rishi Sunak in December of 2022 when he said that he was creating a small boats operational command, bringing all of the entities together, more money, more resources. So let's not be in any doubt that the authorities are already doing all they can, the National Crime Agency and others, to try to pursue those criminal gangs. They're very sophisticated in nature now, in the supply chains that they have and the way that they operate.
OK, Mark, we're just going to cross back now to Sir Keir Starmer, who's just taken the stage in Kent.
Thank you, Mike, for those words. What a fantastic campaign you are running. Thank you, Natalie. It's fantastic to be in your constituency. Welcome to the Labour Party. It's so great to have you on board. And Yvette, thank you for not just your words, but all the work you've done over such a period of time on this important brief and this important challenge. And it's great to be here on a sunny day in Kent, the Garden of England. And I used to play football around here for years. The uncompromising, no-nonsense, hard-knocks training school of the Kent Boys League. So I'm very familiar with this part of the world. But after the elections last week, I have to say, it's a part of the world that the Tories are increasingly unfamiliar with. A county not just green and pleasant, but now also turning red. And by the way, on a day like this, I really am sorry that we're doing this indoors, but we'll be out there before too long. But today we are here on serious business, because this is a community on the front line of one of the gravest challenges we face as a nation. Illegal migration is a test of seriousness for all governments and would-be governments. And not just here, right across the world. A symbol, as I said in my conference speech last year, of a more volatile world, an age of insecurity. Now, it's a really hard nut to crack. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Tackling organised crime is always hard, especially across borders. Now, I know that from my work at the Crown Prosecution Service on drug smuggling or counter-terrorism operations. And let's be clear at the start. This is a criminal enterprise that we are dealing with. A business that pits nation against nation, that thrives in the grey areas of our rules, the cracks between our institutions, where they believe they can exploit some of the most vulnerable people in the world with impunity. A vile trade that preys on the desperation and the hope it finds in its victims, the common humanity that ultimately it seeks to extinguish. And not so long ago, back in 2016, I went for myself to visit the refugee camps on the outskirts of Calais. It was winter, I think it was February. It was absolutely freezing. The ground was mud, sodden with rain and human waste. And I saw children there, 2 in particular in my mind, who were the same age as my children. Back then, that was age 5 and age 7, huddling together in a tent that offered almost nothing in the way of warmth. A desperate situation. Then I went home and said goodnight to my children, the same age, each in their own bedroom, with the central heating on. And I came away from that day profoundly depressed. And I would defy anybody to go into those camps and come away with any other reaction. That camp represented a monumental failure across nations. People had been brutally let down by governments, of course, not just in terms of the awful conditions, but also because the failure of our asylum system had encouraged a false hope, a hope that had unequivocally made those people more vulnerable to exploitation. Gangs were hovering around that camp that day when I went, using it as a job centre for modern slavery. Now, that particular camp has gone, but the smuggling business remains. The exploitation remains. The peril, as Yvette said, the children dying in our waters. Just 3 weeks ago, a 7-year-old girl, the same age as one of the children I saw in that camp. That all remains. And no matter how good anyone thinks their intentions are, turning a blind eye to this business, not understanding how important a rules-based asylum system is for tackling that exploitation, for removing the criminal business model, if you like, that is not progressive and compassionate position. It is the complete opposite of a progressive and compassionate position. This problem must be tackled. These gangs must be stopped. Our asylum system must be rebuilt. Our borders must be secured. But to do that, to finally grip this problem, we need to turn the page and move on from an unhealthy interest in gesture politics that has long defined this policy area and which has dragged the Tories as a serious party of government onto the rocks of their own delusion. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean by gesture politics. September 2020, the Sun newspaper reports that the government is exploring the procurement of Yamaha jet skis. The plan, allegedly, to patrol the English Channel and tow boats containing asylum seekers back to France. October 2020, the Financial Times reports that the government is undertaking a secret consultation with the maritime industry. The plan this time, constructing floating walls or maritime fencing in order to block small boats. And presumably, in the busiest shipping lane in the world, all other boats. December 2020, and Yvette will remember this well, Chris Philp, then the Immigration Minister, at the Home Affairs Select Committee in front of Yvette, refusing to rule out the use of wave machines to blow back the boats, a policy that had by then somehow managed to find its way into the newspapers. I could go on. There is plenty more material. Sound cannons, sonic weapons, various deployments of the Royal Navy against advice and with little success. The list is endless. Yet here we are. Over 8,000 people have made the perilous journey across the Channel in small boats this year, on track to surpass the record set in 2022. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not impliedly criticising the reporting here. If a government source tells you that it's going to build a wall in the English Channel, you better believe that is a story. But the question this record must raise is whether the latest gimmick, the Prime Minister's Rwanda scheme, can really be taken as a serious solution to this important challenge. I don't think so. They will get flights off the ground. I don't doubt that. But I also don't doubt that this will not work. A policy that will see just a few hundred people removed to Rwanda a year. Less than 1% of the people who cross the sea in small boats every year. Less than 1% for £600 million. That is neither an effective deterrent or a good use of your money. And then you look at the rest of our border system, and honestly, it's like a sieve. Just the other day, the Home Office admitted it's lost track of thousands of people that they think have no right to be here. And yet, still, the government refuses to do anything than focus all its time and energy propping up Rwanda, throwing good money after bad, hoping it will get a few flights with, what, a couple of hundred migrants off the ground. Because it's symbolic for party management, for the election. It's gesture politics. £600 million for a few hundred removed. That is gesture politics. And Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently. And today we launch our plan to do that. A new approach to small boat crossings that will secure Britain's borders, prevent the exploitation by tackling it upstream, and smash the criminal smuggling gangs. And as the first step in this plan, a new manifesto commitment. We will set up a new command with new powers, new resources, and a new way of doing things. Border Security Command. Now, this is about leveraging the power and potential of dynamic government based on a counter-terrorism approach which we know works. An end to the fragmentation between policing, the border force and our intelligence agencies. A collecting of the standards. So the border protection becomes an elite force, not a Cinderella service. An essential frontline defence that communities like this can depend on. To do all that, Border Security Command will bring together hundreds of specialist investigators, the best of the best, from the National Crime Agency, the Border Force, Immigration Enforcement, the Crown Prosecution Service, and yes, MI5. All working to a single mission, all freed from the cloying bureaucracy that so often prevents collaboration between different institutions. Now, I've seen this firsthand at the Crown Prosecution Service many times. Good ambition is never enough on its own. But I've seen how with determination, with leadership, with single-minded focus, agencies can work together and deliver results. And not just within one country either. We can cooperate across borders. And that's not some kind of weakness. It's absolutely essential. These criminals do not respect national borders. I mean, when I was at the Crown Prosecution Service, we had prosecutors posted in Pakistan working on counter-terrorism operation, in the Caribbean on smuggling, in West Africa disrupting the flow of drugs coming from South America on their way to Europe and ultimately to Britain. And these operations are not easy. Just think about conducting a raid. I've been through this so many times, seen it in real time. If you've pooled all the intelligence in one place, if you've spent weeks, months, years mapping out the patterns of criminal activity, bringing in prosecutors to help assess the vital evidence, then you cannot have your raid in London going off a single minute earlier or later than the coordinating raid in Paris. So yes, we need more cooperation on illegal migration. We need a new partnership with Europol. We need access to real-time intelligence sharing networks that are so crucial to our security, and which the government so casually threw away as part of its botched Brexit deal. And that's why I've already been to The Hague with Yvette to start pushing for a new security pact with our European partners. But look, It is also my firm belief, based on years of experience in this area, that we also need new and stronger powers to bring these vile criminals to justice. Now, in some areas of criminal activity, now counter-terrorism is the most obvious, we have made the decision that the crime justifies tougher measures.
That's Sir Keir Starmer speaking in Dover to the people there and to us all about his plans on migration. Joining us in the studio is Mark White. Mark, you've listened to some of the stuff. He said we can cooperate across borders. He said access to real-time borders that we threw away over Brexit. He pointed that out. He had to drop that in. A new security pact. He came out with the Border Security Command, which would be based on counter-terrorism plan that he said he know works. An elite force, not a Cinderella service, hundreds of investigators, CPS, MI5, Border Force, all on a single mission, collaboration.
Well, the government would argue that they already launched a small boats operational command from the existing structure. They launched that, Rishi Sunak, in fact, in December of 2022. And that brings together military, civilian, the National Crime Agency. Yes, I think, you know, this repackaging of that and calling it effectively an elite border security command sounds good. I'm sure there will be some extra resources. But at the end of the day, is that actually going to do what he thinks it will achieve in terms of closing down these criminal gangs? They are very sophisticated in the way that they operate. They have very sophisticated supply lines right up to the backstreet factories in China who make the boats all the way along through multiple countries until they eventually get to Europe, then northern France, before heading off on the beaches. It is a multi-million pounds criminal enterprise that you don't just shut down. In terms of...
How much money do they make?
Well, since the beginning of this year, if you take the fact that 9,000 have already crossed, it's about £3,000 per head on the small boats. £27 million is what these criminal gangs have made just in the first 4 months of this year. An indication of just what a lucrative business that no criminal gang will want to give up. It's like the drugs trade. You hear constantly governments around the world talking about their war on drugs. Yes, they have successes. They can take hundreds of millions of pounds of drugs off the street, but it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, doesn't
and
work.
You can bet your boots, if they go after a criminal gang, they take them out of the picture, another will spring up. It's too lucrative.
I think it's the best comparison. The war on drugs, we all know it's failed. You get some hits and some successes here and there, but ultimately the war on drugs still goes on and on and on.
Well, he didn't mention what he's going to do with the people who are here or what he'll do with the people who failed asylum, how he's going to send those
just
back.
1 second on that. I know we're running out of time, but that's a very important point, because he wants to process them quickly and return them to their countries. Well, you can't return one of the biggest groupings to Afghanistan because of the Taliban. Exactly. The next biggest grouping, Iran. You can't return them, or the next biggest grouping Syrians, or the next biggest grouping Iraqis, and so on. There are so many you can't return. What are you going to do with them?
He'll need a third country. He's going to go. I think it's a U-turn coming.
Sounds like, you know, the game Whack-A-Mole, where you're constantly just bashing down moles that pop up. It's just going to be like that with criminal gangs. Got one, got one, got one. All the while, the small boats keep coming. But anyway, we'll see, I guess. Up next, Dominic Cummings. Remember him? The former advisor to Boris Johnson. He's set to start a new political party to replace the Tories. I thought we already had that with Reform UK. More of that after the break. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stick with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me. Okay. Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie, and there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property, and she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
If you just tuned in, welcome on board. It's 27 minutes after 10 o'clock. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Nana Acquia, and Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you. We're also joined by political commentator Matthew Sadlin and former advisor to Michael Gove, the one Charlie Rowley. Good morning to you both. Very quickly, first reactions to Sir Keir Starmer's speech in Dover there. Seemed a bit mute to me, but Charlie?
Well, it was just a load of old bluster, wasn't it? And I feel sorry, actually, for Natalie Elphicke, who's just crossed the floor to hear, to try and stop the boats, to hear the leader of the Labour Party say that he's going to ditch the plan that she's been supporting for such a long time. So I think she'll be clutching her pearls this morning.
Matthew, you're getting giddy and excited in the corner there, seeing your man Sir Keir.
I was impressed by him. He's definitely not my man, and I'm not convinced by the adoption of Natalie Elphicke. However, what he's doing with that is saying we are a broad tent, and if you have never voted Labour before in your life, you are welcome. And you've got to lead the country. You've got to bring people together. On the specifics of this speech, I thought it was a good speech. To me, he sounded prime ministerial. Get rid of this gesture politics nonsense. I think all of us sitting here, and probably everyone watching, knows Rwanda isn't going to work. It's a waste of money. It's cruel. It's not working.
Hold on a minute. It's the Irish are saying that people are going to Southern Ireland, or sorry, the Republic of Ireland, to escape that.
Some people.
Actually, we've had interviews. Patrick Christie's went out and interviewed some of the migrants, the actual migrants, who themselves said they don't want to go to Rwanda.
I'm sure you can find some.
Well, you can find somebody. You said it wasn't working, and it is working.
No, it's not working. Shall I tell you why it's not working?
Well,
Rwanda has been bubbling along, and more than bubbling along in the headlines for I don't know how many months, years. This year, at the moment, is set to break the record of migrants and asylum seekers coming across the channel. So it ain't working.
It's one part of the plan.
But now we're changing the goalposts. It's not working.
It's one part of the plan. I'm not changing the goalposts. Working doesn't mean in its entirety the whole...
Sunak said at the beginning of last year that he was going to sort the boats. He said at January last year, I'm going to stop the boats. How many months have we had since January last year?
I'm not supporting either. I'm talking about Rwanda.
Yeah, and it's not working.
Rishi Sunak, and you said it's not working, and I'm saying that it is for some, and that's part of the...
You say for some. All I can tell you is you can keep saying that till you're blue in the face. All I'm telling you is that this year is going to be a record
for the number of people crossing the channel.
Right, should we...
How can you say that's working?
We don't know
Another
that,
part of the
though.
plan. There's more to it than that, though, isn't there, Charlie?
There is. I mean, we don't know the numbers until the end of the year, and the facts are that in 2022 there were about 50,000 people that crossed the channel. In 2023 it was down to about 30,000. You hope this year it will come down even more, and that is part
It's
of...
going up, Charlie.
Well, you know, we're only...
How can you argue with the statistics?
Because people... I'm sure because people want to, try and come into the country. That's before the Rwanda
so they
policy
can go
gets...
to Rwanda?
In 10 to 12 weeks, those flights will be off the ground. That's
If
what
they
the Prime
come to
Minister
this country
has promised.
already this
And
year,
it
then
will be
they
a
are
deterrent.
eligible to
And
go
as
to
Nana-
Rwanda. It
but
doesn't
as Nana
stop them coming.
As Nana was saying, people are moving from Northern Ireland into the Republic to avoid being...
Some people,
think
because it's still going to be a record.
Listen,
we don't know that. We don't
Nobody's
know that.
saying that
That's
would be
the projection.
Nobody's saying that's the entire solution. But a question to you, Matthew, then. Where will he send people who cannot be sent back to their country that have failed asylum? There will need to be a third country. Rwanda was part of that equation. Where does he intend to send them, or do they all stay here if they fail asylum?
They may well end up staying here.
Well, that's not good enough, is it?
I can't answer
they
for him.
fail asylum,
He
they
has got
stay.
Starmer. There's no doubt that all of this is a difficult question, both in terms of the human beings involved and the politics. Starmer has to wrestle with these, and that's right, because he's going to be our next Prime Minister. He has to make difficult decisions.
Sunak has done more than any Prime Minister and any...
Charlie, it's not worked. It's not worked. Charlie, numbers are up this year compared to last year.
What won't work is ditching the whole policy, which Starmer has just announced. All the money, yes, it's been a very costly scheme, but it is a deterrent as well as all of the other things.
Policy won't
all of the
work.
other things that he's trying to do.
It's a sunk cost, guys.
And so Keir Starmer will ditch it on day one. The public will see that that man is not fit to deal with the issue of immigration, which so many people care about, illegal immigration, which people care about.
Charlie, he won't do it.
And the public will be up in arms.
It's hard to see how he'll do any worse than the Tories and Rishi Sunak. I'm sorry.
But also, he's actually grown up, guys, just quickly to say he's a grown-up enough politician to level with the British public and say this isn't easy. He has had experience of fighting serious organised crime when he ran the Crown Prosecution Service. Great that we've got a politician who actually did something before they went into politics.
Final word to you, Charlie.
Well, I just think that, the idea that the British public are fed up with illegal immigration, Rishi Sunak has done more than anyone against Sir Keir Starmer, who thwarted at every attempt in the House of Commons to get rid of that bill, to disrupt the government's attempts to deal with this issue, which is so important to many people. And I think the people of this country will be looking at Sir Keir Starmer thinking, you're just going to take us back to square one.
Well, it was a very emotional conversation that Sir Keir Starmer had. He did talk a lot of emotion. We'll carry on with that. Mark White will be back at the top of the hour. But thank you to Charlie and Matthew. Sophia Wensler has your headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 10:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. Labour has announced plans to tackle the small boat crisis if it wins the next general election. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled proposals for stronger new counter-terror powers that will effectively treat people smugglers like terrorists. His plans will be supported by around 1,000 additional officers recruited by MI5. To do this, Labour says it'll spend £75 million, equating to a year that would have been spent sending migrants to Rwanda.
Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently. And today we launch our plan to do that. A new approach to small boat crossings that will secure Britain's borders, prevent the exploitation by tackling it upstream, and smash the criminal smuggling gangs.
The UK is no longer in recession, according to official figures. The ONS has published the latest GDP figures, which show the economy grew in the first 3 months of the year. The economy grew better than expected by 0.6% between January and March, according to the Office for National Statistics. And Israel's singer has insisted the Eurovision Song Contest in Sweden remains safe for everyone amid protests against her participating. Eden Golan qualified for the final of the Eurovision Song Contest on Saturday, despite being booed throughout the rehearsals and live event. Protesters want Israel banned in the same way Russia was for its involvement in controversial conflict. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club. proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2534 and €1.1624. The price of gold is £1,892 and 27 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,442 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thanks, Sophia. Up next, a scathing internal report says the Met Police are not fit to serve the capital city effectively. I think we knew that already, didn't we, Nana? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stick with us.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A96 is closed at Elgin after an accident causing delays. In Tyne and Wear, Sand Street in Sunderland's closed after a fire. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is blocked by an accident halfway between Bourne and Market Deeping, causing delays. On the M25 in Essex, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed clockwise, where a lorry is broken down not far after junction 29 for the A127, causing roughly 2 miles of queues. In Kent, the A2 is closed westbound from the M25 to Dartford Heath after an accident causing delays in both directions. On the M26 in Kent, there's a lane closed westbound where someone's broken down between junction 2 at Rootham and the M25, causing queues. And in Bridgend, the A4064 is closed in both directions between Pantygog and Pontaril after an accident. There are delays each way there, and they've got the air ambulance at the scene. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
(10:38), Ben and Nana with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, an internal report, the Metropolitan Police's ability to tackle crimes such as robbery, theft and violence is likely to worsen because of a recruitment crisis.
Now, the Met says that there will be potentially severe consequences and a significant impact on its ability to police the capital if this isn't resolved.
The Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has said, quote, policing is challenging enough without the added strain that concerns about the cost of living are placing on officers. They've seen a 16% real terms cut in pay since 12 years ago. Retired Met Police Officer Graham Wetton joins us now to discuss this. Good morning, Graham. Thanks for joining us. One crucial line from this report I saw was, I think it was up to a third of officers are now below the age of 20 or 21, so we've got a very, very young workforce. How can we expect them to police properly and deal with the public when, arguably, maybe I'm being too harsh, but they don't really have much life experience?
No, you're right. I think what it said was a third of officers are going to have less than 4 years service. So bear in mind you can join at any time from 20 to 24. So they might not be quite as young in age as that, but experience-wise and you know, levels of service-wise, less than 4 years service. Now the report says a third, but that third takes into account the whole workforce. So for your viewers, frontline officers, the officers actually responding to those calls, the robberies, the burglaries, etc., the ones in uniform in the cars, the percentage is likely to be higher because frontline teams are probably 70 to 80% under 4 years policing experience. So when you first join police, you normally go onto a frontline team. Well, the numbers on those teams is likely to be less than 4 years service now. The majority have got less than 4 years policing experience. Your experienced officers will then progress on to specialist roles like counter-terror, murder teams, firearms teams, etc. So the real picture for me is actually worse than what they're saying. It's a third of all officers under 4 years service, but frontline policing is even higher.
What's happened then? Where have the experienced officers gone? Because I remember years ago, it was so strict to become a police officer. You need to be a certain height. Obviously, you can't do that now because that's discrimination. Yep. You needed to, do you know what I mean? There was a real proper, focused, disciplined approach to who could be a police officer, but now it seems a bit of a free-for-all.
Yeah, it is. I think I've been highlighting this for ages. Retention is key. So retaining your experienced officers, and policing is no longer financially seen as a good profession to be in because financially they've suffered significant pay cuts due to austerity, which was right at the time initially, but they are still very much playing catch up. There are private sector jobs that are far more lucrative for officers with experienced policing skills to go to. So there are many officers within policing now looking outside the organisation to go. The demands, the high workload, the high demand, etc. Having less officers around, less support staff to help you, because it wasn't just police numbers that were cut, it was our highly experienced support staff that were also cut at the same time. They haven't been replaced. So you've got officers doing roles that they never used to do in my career in policing. So it's a huge issue. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But retention and recruitment is a major concern for policing and should be for the public as well.
Well, of course, for the public especially, because the report revealed that if the crisis with recruitment and retention continues, it won't only affect crimes such as robbery and theft, but also have, quote, significant impacts on rape victims and the force's ability to reduce the number of sexual offences by bringing criminals to justice. I mean, arguably, rape victims do not get justice in this country anyway, so let alone if this worsens.
Yeah, you're right to highlight that. There's a huge issue with conviction rates for serious sexual offences. So, but that comes down to having experienced investigators working on those cases and experienced support staff. It's a massive issue for government. They really need to look at, one, the pay scales, because the lowest pay scales in policing are not competitive. So you're not attracting the right people. It's not seen as a positive profession anymore. There's so much negativity around policing, probably more than any other profession in society. With you know, loads of social media uploads of what officers are doing or trying to do on the street, it comes down to supporting officers that join, encouraging people to join, but having a proper pay scale that reflects the role they're carrying out in society.
But Graham, there's just no, sorry to interject, there's just no respect for the police anymore. There's no respect. They're either, you know, having two-tier policing of Palestine protests, maybe going to LGBT marches or taking the knee. I mean, it's outrageous. I remember when I was a kid, I went on my first lads' holiday abroad. A couple of my friends, we were 17 at the time, urinated in the street. The Spanish police gave them a clip round the ear, you know, quite forcefully. They never did it again. I'm not saying we should have...
You don't know that. They might have somewhere else.
But I'm just saying there's no respect. When I was young, the police were to be feared. They were respected and feared. If there was a copper around, you were like, OK, let's behave. Nowadays, they're a laughingstock.
Yeah, in some respects. And some of those issues you highlighted, I think the taking the knee was just one incident. So, yeah, but that's the issue here. You have one negative incident, and it seems society, as you've just mentioned there, that carries on forever. So there are many positive interactions. And I don't think policing should be feared as such. Respected is a different word. It should be respected, but I don't think it's a respected profession as it used to be when I joined in society now. And that's the key. I think it needs more respect and more support and more positivity around it. All we ever talk about, and you just alluded to that, was the negative aspects in policing. There are far more positive interactions and actions carried out police officers than we hear about. It's always a negative thing, which I think, and for policing, as I said, it's almost the one profession that gets that all the time.
I just want to very briefly ask you, because we are running out of time, do you think that part of the reason why people don't want to join the police force is that if certain actions you don't get support from, so, for example, if you shot someone as part of your job, then you could get in trouble because it could have been a mistake or this or that. That people don't feel supported. That if they do try and make an arrest or do something, then all this sort of this wokery that's surrounded policing now, that they can't do their job properly anyway.
I think officers and I speak to them regularly these days. I know many still serving. They do feel they're under the microscope, but for whatever actions they take, and quite often in the right circumstances. So there is a sense of almost like they are not supported, not just within policing, but within society. And I think that impacts on attracting the right people to join policing. Pay is a huge issue. London waiting is a huge issue within London because it's so expensive. So across the country, pay scales need reviewing to attract more people into policing. But the other aspect is, again, supporting them once they're in the organisation and the job to do their job properly.
Yeah. OK, Graham, you do make some good points. There are plenty of very good and capable police officers, and if you or I were going to get mugged in the street, the first person we'd want there is a police officer. So, good point not to tar them all with the same brush.
Exactly.
However,
there are some very good officers there, and I think most people join to do good. Obviously, you get your bad eggs, but, in general, people do want a good job. They should be paid properly and supported. Thank you so much, Graham. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks, Graham.
Right, up next, former President Donald Trump, third week on his hush money trial, has become very lively this week. We'll fill you in with what happened. This is GB News, Britain's Newsroom.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. The fine and often sunny weather many of us have had recently will continue for a little while yet. Yes, there are some mist and fog patches around first thing this morning, but these will quickly burn back because there'll be plenty of sunshine around. Lots of bright blue skies on offer as we head into the afternoon. There are a bit more cloud towards Shetland, a little bit of rain here, and elsewhere 1 or 2 showers possible. Most places staying dry and in the sunshine, feeling even warmer than yesterday. Highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius. Little change as we go through this evening and overnight. It is going to stay settled. A lot of the cloud will actually clear away, so clear skies for many of us, though some low cloud pushing in from the North Sea across some eastern parts, and elsewhere a few pockets of mist and fog are possible. Temperatures generally dropping to high single figures or low double digits. We start Saturday on a fine note for many places, though quite cloudy towards eastern parts. Again, any mist and fog will quickly burn back, and then once more another largely fine day for many of us. Just watch out for the potential for some showers to develop over high ground towards northern England, and some of these could be heavy. Temperatures even higher than today for some of us, highs of around 25, possibly 26 Celsius. On Sunday, there's the risk of some showery rain, which could turn heavy, possibly thundery, developing across western parts. Further east, however, it's likely to stay largely dry. Again, plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures could get even higher with highs of 26 or 27.
Friday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Lee Anderson's Real World at 7. At 8, it's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's fast approaching 50 minutes after 10 o'clock. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, former porn star Stormy Daniels has concluded that her testimony at Donald Trump's hush money trial, fighting off all inquiries into her account of the alleged sexual encounter between her and the former President Trump.
Yes, and it follows a scathing attack by the judge who blames Donald Trump's lawyers for letting Daniels describe lurid details as he denied Trump a mistrial for the second time this week. And there was the reports yesterday saying that Stormy Daniels was going into some quite graphic detail about her sexual encounter with Trump, which his team protested against. Joining us now in the studio is Chair of Republican Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Good morning, Greg. So just very briefly on yesterday's incident about Stormy Daniels going into too much detail. What happened exactly? What was she talking about?
Yeah, she just
she
really got into stories, right? And I'll try not to use any language, but really was designed to slander and embarrass President Trump. There's no other point to it because it had nothing to do with the alleged crime. The alleged crime was a bookkeeping mistake or bookkeeping entry. So, they haven't mentioned that yet. In 3 weeks of the trial, they have not mentioned the alleged crime, which is a misdemeanor in New York, which they're trying to elevate to a felony by connecting it to another crime, which is something more to do with the election. So again, this is not about, nor it should be, about Stormy Daniels and any kind of alleged affair. So
maybe she thought she was on one of those sort of phone sex lines or something. I don't know what she thought she was doing. But why, on the wider point of this, why is it being such a big trial when, as you said, it's simply a misdemeanor? How are the Americans responding to this? Because surely they will be able to see through this.
Absolutely. They're seeing through it. Now, 6 months ago, I was arguing that this was going to help him in the nomination process because the trial is completely meritless, right? It's just obscene. So it really helped him in the nomination. He got a 30-point bump when Alvin Bragg filed the indictment. And I was afraid that while it would help him in the nomination, it would have an effect, a negative effect, in the general election. And I'm wrong on that. It's helping him now. He has turned this into a campaign event, and the American voters are seeing through it. 66% of Americans see this as a political witch hunt. 56% think Joe Biden is behind it, and I have to agree with that. And by 54% think there's a double standard. Only 36% do not think there's a double standard. 56% think Biden wants to put him in jail, and only 30% don't agree with that. So, this is all consistent with Biden's 66% disapproval rating as well.
Joe, calling you Joe Biden. Greg,
he's awake.
What do you make of the argument from Trump supporters that Joe Biden, more than any other president, has really weaponised the Department for Justice and the political arms of the US government because he's gone after Trump and also the district attorneys of New York, Alvin Bragg, big Democrats, the other district attorney boasting about the fact that she'd fined Donald Trump hundreds of millions of dollars. Has Joe Biden weaponise the DOJ?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's his Justice Department. He is the boss, and he really encouraged a lot of this. Fani Willis's the prosecutor, the one she was having an affair with, visited the White House on several occasions for long, 6-8 hour meetings. So there's no doubt that Biden was involved, and none of this would happen without his blessing.
Let's be honest, though. Biden is involved as in the people pulling the strings of Joe Biden, because nobody seriously thinks that Joe Biden is actually compos mentis and actually honestly involved. Surely that is what people are saying, because as people talk as if, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. Joe Biden is asleep on most of these things, and he doesn't even know the way off or on the stage.
It hasn't been a good week for President Biden. No. I mean, he had an interview with Aaron Burnett at CNN, which is a very friendly network to the president, and offered as much of a softball as possible. And he started talking about the economy, and it really demonstrated sort of economic elitism for President Biden. He's saying the economy is great because rich people aren't affected by inflation.
Didn't he say that inflation...
Did he say that out loud?
No, he didn't say it directly, but he implied that everything's great. Meanwhile, and then he also said that we inherited this horrible 9% inflation, which is completely untrue. Yeah. Either he's lying deliberately, or he's just so asleep at the wheel.
He doesn't know what he's doing.
It was 1.4%.
And he's getting some stick overnight because he said the US won't supply weapons for Israel's incursion in Rafah. He's being accused, actually, of supporting Hamas.
Yeah, no, he's basically supporting Hamas here. I mean, he's trying to play both sides. He's trying to, support Israel, or at least say he's supporting Israel, which by most measures he has. But At the same time, he's doing the same thing that he did in Ukraine. He's withholding weapons. This was congressionally approved funding, and he has deliberately stopped it, just like they accused Trump of doing in Ukraine in 2019, and they impeached him for it.
OK, Greg. Chairman of Republicans Overseas, thanks very much. The sun is trying its hardest to peek its head out, and I'm celebrating after 8-9 months of grey skies and rain. Here's your weather reports. Hopefully, it's going to continue into the weekend. Here's Alex.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. The fine and often sunny weather many of us have had recently will continue for a little while yet. Yes, there are some mist and fog patches around first thing this morning, but these will quickly burn back because there'll be plenty of sunshine around. Lots of bright blue skies on offer as we head into the afternoon. There are a bit more cloud towards Shetland, a little bit of rain here, and elsewhere 1 or 2 showers possible. Most places staying dry and in the sunshine, feeling even warmer than yesterday. Highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius. Little change as we go through this evening and overnight. It is going to stay settled. A lot of the cloud will actually clear away, so clear skies for many of us, though some low cloud pushing in from the North Sea across some eastern parts, and elsewhere a few pockets of mist and fog are possible. Temperatures generally dropping to high single figures or low double digits. We start Saturday on a fine note for many places, though quite cloudy towards eastern parts. Again, any mist and fog will quickly burn back, and then once more another largely fine day for many of us. Just watch out for the potential for some showers to develop over high ground towards northern England, and some of these could be heavy. Temperatures even higher than today for some of us, highs of around 25, possibly 26 Celsius. On Sunday, there's the risk of some showery rain, which could turn heavy, possibly thundery, developing across western parts. Further east, however, it's likely to stay largely dry. Again, plenty of sunshine here, and temperatures could get even higher with highs of 26 or 27.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Friday the 10th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Nana Acquia and Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you too. Labour's migration plan. So Keir Starmer has set out his strategy to tackle the small boat crossings this morning, and it involves relying on closer EU cooperation.
Good luck with that. Now, more Tory turncoats. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting claims that he's spoken to other Tory MPs who are considering defecting to Labour.
And are you going to be tuning in Saturday night? Eurovision on high alert. Israel has made it through to the final tomorrow, despite thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters wanting them removed from the competition.
And warnings from the Bank of England. The chief economist Hugh Pill, that soaring immigration is fuelling Britain's housing crisis. Who knew?
You're a Eurovision fan, Nana?
Oh, it's on in the background because I feel I have to, but I just find it I can't bear it. I watched it. I loved it when Terry Wogan used to host it. Do you remember when he used to do the voiceover?
Yeah.
Oh, he was hilarious.
Yeah, it was good fun. It just seems this year especially, it's always so politicised. I mean, it has been, of course, in recent years, but the scenes from Malmo in Sweden where there's hundreds and hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters hounding the Israeli entrant. And, of course, if you know Sweden, Malmo, the demographics there is a very high migrant area. It's something like 60–70% migrants. So
it's just been weaponised, hasn't it? Turned into some political LGBT plus trans flag waving event that just really doesn't.
I'll tell you what you can do instead. Tune into Saturday 5,
exactly
6 till 8, and then I think it's Mark Dolan from 8 onwards. So forget Eurovision, stick with us.
Stay with us, but send us your thoughts as ever. gbnews.com/your say. But first, let's get an update with your news from Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Rwanda asylum policy will end under Labour, with Sir Keir Starmer describing the scheme as an absolute waste of money. The party leader, who's in Kent, says he wants to create a border security command to tackle the small boat crisis. Sir Keir unveiled proposals for stronger new counter-terror powers that will effectively treat people smugglers like terrorists. His plans will be supported by around 1,000 additional officers recruited by MI5. Labour says it'll spend £75 million if it wins the general election, the equivalent of what would have been spent sending migrants to Rwanda for a year.
Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently. And today we launch our plan to do that. A new approach to small boat crossings that will secure Britain's borders, prevent the exploitation by tackling it upstream, and smash the criminal smuggling gangs.
The UK is no longer in recession. The Office for National Statistics has published the latest GDP figures, which show the economy grew in the first 3 months of the year. The figures are better than expected, estimated to have risen by 0.6% between January and March. The Chancellor says it shows the government's decisions are paying off, but Labour says the Tories are out of touch if they're celebrating the data as a win. Dominic Cummings plans to create a new party that he hopes will replace the Conservatives. Speaking to the I paper in his first interview since leaving Downing Street in 2020, Boris Johnson's former chief advisor said the new start-up party could capitalise on the expected collapse in Tory vote at the next general election. A judge has denied Donald Trump's request for a mistrial in his hush money case as Stormy Daniels concludes her testimony. The former porn star finished her second day on the stand, which saw explicit allegations of a sexual encounter between her and the former president. Donald Trump's lawyer unsuccessfully argued for a gag order to be changed so Trump could respond to Stormy Daniels' testimony. The judge denied the former US president a mistrial for the second time this week and also criticised Trump's lawyer, as US political analyst Eric Ham explains.
And what the judge said was pretty striking. He says that, look, you actually brought this up when you said in your opening that Donald Trump did not have an affair with this woman. So therefore, it was only right for her to go into detail to describe her relationship, to actually paint for the jury that, in fact, this did happen. And he did say that, and he admonished Donald Trump's lawyers that they could have actually objected to many of the things that were said by Stormy Daniels. I do believe that depending on what happens with the verdict, I do believe that we perhaps will see an appeal by Donald Trump's lawyers.
Boeing has suffered a third plane crash in just 2 days. According to reports, 190 people were safely evacuated from an aircraft in Turkey after one of the tyres burst. This comes after a cargo aircraft landed on its nose in Istanbul as another jet skidded off the runway and caught fire in Senegal. There is no suggestion Boeing are to blame for the crashes, and they are yet to comment on the incidents. Israel's singer has insisted the Eurovision Song Contest in Sweden remains safe for everyone amid protests against her participating. Eden Golan qualified for the final of the Eurovision Song Contest on Saturday, despite being booed throughout the rehearsals and live event. Protesters want Israel banned in the same way Russia was for its involvement in controversial conflict. Police managed to see off thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators who were surrounding the stadium. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 11 o'clock. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Nana Acquia, and Ben Leo.
Very good morning to you. Some emails have been flying in. One very quickly from John Andrews, our member on gbnews.com/you'll say. Good morning, John. You say, morning, Ben and Nana. Nana, is Ben taking you raving down Brighton this weekend?
Why do I look like I'm going out clubbing?
Yeah, interesting. I haven't been to a rave in many, many years. I'll be taking my kid to tennis and trying to get some shut-eye.
And I'll actually be on air, actually, so don't forget to tune into my show, 3 till 6 every day, Saturday, Sunday. And actually tonight, I'll be Patrick Christie.
Oh, you are, aren't you?
I am Patrick Christie tonight.
And I hear you've got a cracking show coming up.
We've got lots of things. I'll tease you with some of that later. But some of you being in touch, and Brendan says, how much of our sovereignty will Sir Keir Starmer give up to achieve his cooperation with our European partners? That's going to cost, even if it's all achievable.
And Sharon says, Starmer sounded like someone who's just got the results of a recent focus group and found out that immigration and secure borders are important. I've said that before about Sir Keir Starmer. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice chap, but he has these buzzwords that I am very certain his media team, his press team, brief him at the start of the day. At the very, 6 a.m, they'll say, right, today's word of the day is strong and secure. And you watch. All throughout the day, every interview, he'll say it again and again and again.
This one I wanted to read from Anthony because he's talking about Rwanda. He said the reason Rwanda is delayed is because Labour, the lawyers and the ECHR have done everything to stop it, so Starmer is partly to blame and Blair completely responsible for mass migration. Well, listen, in the last hour, Sir Keir Starmer said that he'll scrap the Rwanda plan on day one and use that money to part-fund his strategy to tackle the small boats crisis.
The Labour leader claims the Rwanda plan is an absolute waste of UK money as he was setting out his own plans to crack down on illegal migration.
Well, joining us now in the studio is our Home and Security editor, Mark White. So earlier, Keir Starmer spoke. He came out with all the right kind of words. Took him a lot of time to get to the point. What did you make of his proposal, this sort of border security type force that he was talking about?
Well, first on that Rwanda plan, he confirmed again that the Labour government, if he gets into power, would scrap the Rwanda plan, so no third country to send these asylum seekers off to. And of course, once again, he repeated, which is just disingenuous, actually, this mantra that the government is only going to send a few hundred people off to Rwanda. The government has been explicit in this. There is no cap on how many they will send to Rwanda. The Rwandan government said that they stand ready to take thousands. It will be a few hundred to begin with as they ramp up. They've got to make the facilities available as the flights go out there. But the government's not naive enough to think that 300 people going to Rwanda would ever be a deterrent. It has to be numbers in the thousands. And the other issue, I think, in scrapping Rwanda is then he comes up against a real roadblock in what you do with those you can't send back to their home country. Because, again, part of his policy announced today is there will be hundreds of additional caseworkers to stop people languishing in hotels at a cost of £8 million a day. Lots of people agree that is just ridiculous and shouldn't be happening. But you've got a problem of those who you may then deny asylum, but they come from Afghanistan. You can't send them back there, or Iran, or Iraq, or Syria. You can't send them back to those countries. So what do you do with them if you don't have a third country, as the Conservative government have in Rwanda? Where do you put them? Well, they just languish somewhere then because they have to remain here in the UK.
So Keir Starmer says that he has to scrap Rwanda because it will fund the £75 million for his own plans.
Well, indeed. He wants a great emphasis, or a greater emphasis, on going after the criminal gangs. But the government effectively relaunched the Border Force operation, called it the Small Boats Operational Command, in December 2022. That brought together military, civilian, the National Crime Agency. What we're getting from Keir Starmer is that, but of course, a bit of extra funding, some extra powers, but whether it will make actually real difference and inroads in dismantling the criminal gangs yet to be seen.
It's just a game of cat and mouse, as you see on the war on drugs. The war on drugs has never ended. They've never won it. You get some successes here and there, but ultimately more gangs will pop up. It's not just some kids sending people over on a dinghy. This is a sophisticated network of criminals.
If you dismantled these gangs back in 2018, when this phenomenon really started across the channel, 2018, 2019, that time, before they'd really grown in sophistication, got their proper supply lines over the recent years, then you would have stood a much better chance in just dismantling them altogether. They're now, as you say, very sophisticated. They operate models not dissimilar to the way in which the cocaine or the heroin trade operates as well. They factor into that a certain number of losses, in other words, a certain number of boats that never make it to the UK. But those that do, 9,000 so far this year, they've made 27 million at least out of those 9,000 migrants.
Doing all the things that he said, this new border command, security command, terrorism plan, all that. Aren't we already doing this? I mean, you've alluded to the fact that what he's said, but it is kind of what we've already got. What is extra in what he's saying? I just don't see what thing is different to what's already happening.
Well, I think he is, as Ben was saying, there's going to take some of the money, divert it to put in place extra investigators there. So there will be some more people working on that. They may have some additional powers to hand, but it's a mammoth task to try to confront these criminal gangs and to dismantle them. And I think he is going to find out, if he does get into government, pretty quickly just what an intractable problem this small boats issue is, and it is not as easy as just rebranding your border security command.
Well, that'll be interesting to see what happens. Well, joining us now, thank you very much to Mark White, is international human rights lawyer David Hay. David, you've heard what Sir Keir Starmer said. I'm presuming you heard what he said. Does it have any implications legally? Is he able to do this legally?
Good morning to you both. I mean, I watched all of the speech, and it's certainly something I think many of us have been waiting for quite a while, to see how Labour would put down in cast iron promises as what if anything they're going to do. And I think there's, the speech in general, there was a lot of, as I think you both said earlier, saying the right things, and particularly words coming that a lot of people have used in the past: chaos, broken, asylum system, etc. and some new initiatives perhaps that he's talked about. But it's not so much from a legal perspective, because I think certainly from a legal perspective he can do the things that he set out. It's whether or not that will be effective, whether or not it is going to tackle the problem that we have, and whether or not those things are kind of already in place somewhat as they are. That's one of the issues. And one of the big gaps, and Keir Starmer mentioned the word sieve, one of the big gaps that I thought that they would address, and I think Mark White started to cover it as well, is if they've scrapped the Rwanda policy, you have got an awful lot of people on these waiting lists in the UK as we speak. What are we going to do with them? Where are they going to go? That hasn't been addressed, and that's a gaping hole. I think one of the other gaping holes that he hasn't addressed from a legal problem is that this definition that we have, and as a human rights lawyer, I'll make myself unpopular with a few of my colleagues by saying this, but the definition we have where it comes to asylum seekers coming over because they're persecuted and their lives are at risk, or they're merely being discriminated against. And until we address that on a wider international level, the numbers are generally, in whichever country you look at that's suffering from these problems, not going to decrease significantly, I don't think.
Why? What's the reasoning for that? Because obviously you know that, but why? Why do they need to address those particular definitions?
Issue that you have, many of the issues that you have at the moment. So let's take, if you look at people that are LGBTQ coming from, for instance, a Muslim country that criminalises that, then, and I'm not saying they're all coming to this country, that on a general legal perspective, they have a right of asylum in other countries if they can show that they are suffering discrimination. Now, obviously, when the Refugee Convention was written back after the Second World War, it was more about actual persecution and risk of life. And that's a very grown-up conversation that effectively the world needs to have. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation because it's changing the system somewhat. But that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many people coming here. Because, of course, if you look at the number of the people that do come here across the Channel and do come here for asylum, the majority of them effectively are getting accepted anyway. Speeding it up, yes, that's going to help an awful lot. And that's one of the things that I've said needs to be done. Rather than it taking 2 or 3 years for an asylum process, it should be taking 2 weeks. And that will become a deterrent. But many other things need to be done as well. Yes, we need to bulk up the border forces and tackle the criminal gangs. But we also need to have that uncomfortable discussion about what should asylum rights look like in the future.
David, it's been argued from the likes of Reform UK that the only way to sort this problem out, and it's not the Rwanda plan, is to do what Australia did in the mid-2000s. Tony Abbott won election on it, is turn the boats back. And that doesn't mean attaching some flimsy ropes to their vessels and towing them into dangerous waters. You put them into very safe and sturdy lifeboat-style vessels.
Or your own boat.
Or your own boat. You've got the Navy.
Like we do anyway. And instead of turning around...
You physically turn them back. And in Australia, they stopped overnight. The gangs knew they weren't going to be making any money, and it stopped. Why can't we just do that? Because as far as I understand, we can do it under the United Nations Conventions of the Laws of the Sea, Article 25, where you can stop the passage of a vessel into your own waters if they're deemed a threat. Why can't we just do that?
I think technically, legally, there is a route that you could technically do that. But I think the practicalities of us going into the busiest shipping channel, picking people up, putting them on a boat and shoving them back to France, what would France do? I think that practically, I don't see that happening. I think Australia is very different because of they don't have the problems that we have with the European Union, with France, with borders, with the Channel being so busy. I think I think technically, yes, it's a nice soundbite, but would it work in practice? I don't see that.
I don't see why it shouldn't. I'd love to see it working. I think if we did it, then people wouldn't do it anymore because they'd know that they wouldn't get anywhere. Thank you very much, David. Really good to talk to you. Stay tuned, though. Still to come is Dominic Cummings planning on starting a new political party to replace the Conservatives. We'll be speaking about that next.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stick with us.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Humza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the Clype's Charter.
Clype, a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up at the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back, 11:21. Ben and Nana with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We are joined by the presence of Michael Gove's former advisor Charlie Rowley and political commentator and broadcaster Matthew Southern. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good morning. Now,
Fireworks ahead.
Fireworks, really? Why? Why fireworks? Charlie Rowley, do you want to start us off with the migrant situation, the housing crisis? Apparently it's fuelling the lack of housing.
Yeah, well, it is, and I think it's something that many people are worried about. When you have too many people coming into the country, when you don't have the public services, when you don't have the housing, where there is a housing shortage, that drives up community tensions. It drives up the reason why we're seeing so many people worried about immigration, particularly illegal immigration, and that's why it has got to be a priority for the government, and that's why Rishi Sunak's getting on with it.
But it's not been a priority, has it? Your government, your party rather, has allowed a city the size of Birmingham every 2 years, predicted net migration of 350k a year. You can't stop the boats, so it's not a priority. There's no point reading off Tory propaganda.
We keep having this conversation. we keep going round and round on this one, Benjamin. And the reason that is because there have been failures in the past. No doubt about it. Can't get away from it. But every party seems to have failed. Every government has failed. It was under the Labour government that actually increased immigration, I think, back in the day. So Rishi Sunak, though, you cannot fault him. Whatever you think about the Conservative government, you cannot fault Rishi Sunak for trying to get a grip of this issue. He's done more than any other Prime Minister, any other Tory leader to get a grip of illegal immigration, and he's getting on with it.
Keir Starmer has a plan, Matthew.
What was that minister in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Comical Ali?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
The tanks aren't here.
Here we go. It's all OK.
So you think Keir Starmer's plan, his plan of action this morning, when he talked about a command border security force, it's a sort of counter-terrorism effect, an elite force, not a Cinderella service, hundreds hundreds of investigators, CPS, MI5, Border Force, all on a single mission. Did that convince you?
I want to talk about housing because that's something we need to talk a lot more about.
Well, no, I'm asking you about
I will answer specifically about... I will answer your question. As I've said already on the show, I was quite impressed by it. And one of the reasons I'm impressed by it is because he doesn't pretend it's not a big problem. He doesn't pretend it's not a serious problem. He doesn't pretend it doesn't affect real lives, really vulnerable people living in terrible conditions. He showed empathy. He also recognised is that people want to stop the boats. But he's not going to say we're going to do it overnight. And he's not going to do it with gesture politics or gimmicks.
Well, let's go into the
He's going to take it seriously. But on the housing question, yes.
Because he didn't mention how he's going to deal with the people that are already here.
Some...
Hang on.
Yes.
He didn't mention the people that are already here, or Rwanda, which is where we send people who shouldn't be here, which is all putting pressure on the housing service. So how do you think he plans to tackle that? I think
some of what Charlie said earlier, there's a bit of truth in it. And I think that there undoubtedly is pressure across the board on our housing system. Some of that will likely come from immigration. But I want to make a few points on this. First of all, what's the big elephant in the room that we don't spend nearly enough time talking about? Successive governments, and I would include the former Labour government, we're just not building enough houses. We have to build.
Yeah, but we
want
never
our politicians.
have enough.
We want our politicians
not
just to say that they're going to build, but actually to build. The second thing is...
Hold on. You can do the second thing first in a moment, but there'll never be enough houses.
No one keeps me in check like Nana does.
If you don't tackle the current influx, there will never be enough.
Look, the second thing is we look through history. Who do we blame when government policies aren't working? We blame immigrants. We blame the other.
But it's true. It's not blaming, it's a reality.
The third thing is... Both
economics.
The Tories are trying to stop the boats. They want to stop the boats. Starmer wants to stop the boats. That's not the big pressure on housing. And there is a catch-22 here, because there is no doubt that we need some immigration. This idea of running the country...
Well, Matthew, latest GDP figures showed that the GDP per capita, which I say again and again, week after week, the truest reflection of how well-off individuals are, contracted by 0.7% despite mass migration. It's a myth. It's a myth that migrants are good for the economy.
That does not mean that it's contracted because of immigration. It might have contracted more.
But you've got record migration and it's not gone down.
There are two things that can run concurrently that aren't necessarily linked. Let me make this point because it's a really important one. I'll try to be quick. Richard Tice, the head of Reform UK, he wants to run the country like a nightclub, one in, one out. I would have the country run seriously where there is need. I'll give you a quick example. 150,000 health and social care visas we gave out last year, right? Without those people coming to our country, we would be absolutely in a terrible mess.
Let me put something to you then.
Yeah.
How about you pay health and social care workers more money in this country and encourage the people of this country to take those jobs?
Love it.
Rather than being drunk on cheap labour, which is what you're proposing. You're saying 150,000 care workers on cheap labour, bringing down the current price of their job and their work because you think that we should take immigration. I'm
all for proper wages for people who do those sorts of jobs.
Exactly, and then you'll find that you probably need less migration because the British people will see that as a valuable
The question is
job.
why, after 14 years of Tory rule, are care workers not being paid the sort of wages we'd all like them to be paid?
Well, that's a good question, but it was not that great with Labour either.
Charlie, Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's former infamous advisor, he has been spouting off today about the fact he wants to potentially start a new political party to deal with the, quote, F-word pigs Conservatives. Has that got any chance? I thought we had Reform UK to do that.
Well, good luck to Dominic Cummings. I feel if he does set up a new party, there'll be less people in there than the nightclub that Richard Tice is running, by the sounds of things, because it'll be a party for one, I should imagine. Look, I mean, Dominic Cummings, I think, fell out with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice over the referendum campaign because of the trying to lead the Vote Leave campaign.
Well, crucially, Cummings says Farage wouldn't be welcome in his new party.
Then,
well, he's not going to have anyone in it.
I don't think he's going to have many people, but I think most people who... look, there are... Whatever you think about Dominic Cummings, and he made huge mistakes, obviously, in terms of what he did during lockdown. But he's a strategist. He has got some talents. Everybody's got talent. But I don't think setting up a new political party, given his charisma and charm to people over, I don't think that'll be a very...
I've just created a headline. Nobody's Cummings to Dominic's party.
Just a quick thing on the Cummings party. I'm not quite sure what his manifesto would be. He's anti-populism, he says. I certainly don't think he would generate a following, though I don't think he's putting himself forward. In a way, the most interesting thing that came out of this interview, the first newspaper interview he's given in years, I think, is what he said about Farage. And he says in the eye, he says, depends on what Farage does. If Farage unretires, the Tories could easily be driven down to double-digit seats, and then discussions of a start-up party, what he's proposing, and replacing them will go from a very fringe idea to being a very mainstream idea. It's not quite clear why he thinks his party, rather than Farage's party or Richard Tice's party, would be the party. But it is very interesting that one of the biggest political strategic thinkers who helped push Brexit over the line seriously thinks that the Tories could be reduced to double digits.
I think you give Dominic Cummings... He's obviously a very clever guy, you know, no doubt about it, but I think he gets too much credit for Vote Leave, especially. They didn't even want to campaign on migration about Vote Leave. I've read many Brexit books where they talk about Cummings and Vote Leave and all the rest of the cohorts who were on the opposite side of the fence on migration to Farage and everyone else.
I think Boris Johnson would tell you that he was pretty important, and that's why he took him straight into number 10. All I'm saying is a serious political thinker...
Not to the public. Okay. This is a very Western public.
A serious political thinker thinks that the Tories might be reduced to double digits. We should sit up and listen to that.
My 4-year-old kid could tell you that.
Can I just briefly get to the Eurovision?
Yes.
Because I wrote a little piece in the Mail Online about how seedy and woke-fest it had become and politically motivated.
It's demonic now.
It's demonic, isn't it? What's wrong with it? Matthew Stadlin, your brief views on that?
I have absolutely no interest in Eurovision, but what I do have an interest in is that although I think what Israel is doing in response to the horrors of October the 7th is a very bad thing in Gaza, I'm appalled that we've had those demonstrations outside the hotel of a 20-year-old Israeli woman who's clearly not responsible for Israel's response to October the 7th. And it's particularly sick, if you think about it, when we know the sexual violence, the horrific accounts of sexual violence that happened on October the 7th, that we now have crowds of tens of thousands of people gathering, OK, peacefully, outside the hotel of a 20-year-old Israeli woman. It's not on.
Charlie Rowley.
I'm just looking forward to the results. And that's the only reason I tune in, really. And
do you tune in, actually?
For the results, the nil points just keep coming and coming for the UK. And I might just bring back an old Eurovision tradition, just have a little Bucks fizz.
So you've got...
What do you think of our entry, Ollie Alexander? What do you think? He's a years and years front-runner, front singer.
Yeah, I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm a huge fan of his work. But I do like his music.
But that particular song, have you heard it?
But I haven't heard it. I'll reserve for Saturday.
He said he was... what were the exact words? He said he was ashamed about the Union Jack.
Called it divisive.
And I think that's wrong. I mean, look, you know, I think people that are great artists in music or in sports, whether it's Gary Lineker or whether it's whatever his name is, you know, stick to your talents, which is sports or music. You no need necessarily. Music has a great role to play in terms of pushing the boundaries, making us think about different things, making us feel different emotions. But I think as an artist, if you stray into politics where you might actually not know what you're talking about, I think it becomes...
He didn't say it was ashamed, but he was ambivalent about it.
Well, he said it's divisive.
Yeah, by the way...
It can be divisive.
By the way,
well, every flag is divisive. It divides which country is...
He's surely referring to the fact, and it is a fact, that when I used to go to football games in the mid-90s, the Union Jack had become a symbol of the National Front. Starmer is reclaiming this flag.
Starmer. It was reclaimed long before that, and it's a flag, and every flag is divisive. It divides one country over the next.
His point is it's divisive within our country.
No, it's just a flag. It's a flag for the
United States. Only by those who want
it. You shouldn't be representing the
Charlie Rowley, Matthew Stadlin, thanks very much. One person who unifies us all is Sophia, and she's got your headlines.
Ben, thank you. It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Rwanda asylum policy will end under Labour, with Sir Keir Starmer describing the scheme as an absolute waste of money. The party leader, who's in Kent, says he wants to create a border security command to tackle the small boat crisis. Sir Keir unveiled proposals for stronger new counter-terror powers that will effectively treat people smugglers like terrorists. Labour says it'll spend £75 million on the plan if it wins the next general election, the equivalent of what would have been spent sending migrants to Rwanda for a year.
Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders. tackle this problem at source and replace the Rwanda policy permanently. And today we launch our plan to do that. A new approach to small boat crossings that will secure Britain's borders, prevent the exploitation by tackling it upstream, and smash the criminal smuggling gangs.
The UK is no longer in recession, with the latest figures showing the economy performed better than expected. The Office for National Statistics estimates GDP rose by 0.6% between January and March. The Chancellor says it shows the government's decisions are paying off, but Labour says the Tories are out of touch if they're celebrating the data as a win. And Israel's Eurovision Song Contest entrant says Sweden remains safe for everyone, despite protests against her participation. Eden Golan qualified for tomorrow's final, even though she was booed throughout the rehearsals and live event. Protesters want Israel to be banned from the contest in the same way Russia was after it invaded Ukraine. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2527 and 1.1624 euros. The price of gold is £1,894 and 42 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,452 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sophia. Right, well, up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with just Tom
All
Harwood.
by myself, by my lonesome today.
Oh.
No. Well, I'll be back with Emily on Monday, but she is...
Has she had enough of you?
Well, that might be part of the reason. But no, she's on her hen do.
Oh, that's
which
nice.
is... so I'm sure she's having a marvellous time, or at least her friends are making sure that she has a marvellous time. But lots to come up during our airtime in 12 till 3 today. Not least, our very own Liam Halligan has had a sit-down with the Prime Minister, and we'll be getting that interview played out in the show. He'll have a lot to talk about. New growth figures out today, which, of course, show the fastest growth in 2 years. But, of course, it does follow a mild recession at the end of last year. We know that Liam will be putting the Prime Minister through his paces.
That'd be interesting,
but there are
won't it?
also a lot of live events that happen in our airtime. There are going to be no less than 3 sentencings of various, 2 sentencings of some pretty, well, we're not allowed particularly to talk too much about the details of them until the sentencing has completed, of course. But one of them involves the pensioner from West London who was stabbed on his mobility scooter. So we're going to be getting lots of detail about that once the judge has spoken, of course.
Great stuff. You on your lonesome for 3 hours?
On my lonesome for 3 hours, but not just me, of course, because everyone will be getting involved. gbnews.com/your say. There's going to be lots of interaction. It's going to be feeling like there's all so many of us there.
Good plug. I'm really keen to see that interview with Liam and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Really interesting.
OK, all that and more to come at midday. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. See you in just a tick.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this
bubble as the nuclear test veteran community fighting against the establishment. And they will say, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. It just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pensions Scheme. The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service."
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 39 minutes after 11 o'clock. I'm Nana Acquare with Ben Leo. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Very good morning to you. Now, Cornish MP Steve Double is calling on the government to pump more money into coastal communities across the United Kingdom. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has this report.
Sam Richardson is a singer-songwriter from St Agnes in Cornwall. Much of his music reflects a sense of frustration with life in a coastal town.
We've got a lot of empty shops in a lot of our town centres, which is sort of causing a lot of death on the high street. I know that's a problem everywhere, but it is particularly bad down in Cornwall. I think that infrastructure as well, for me, is like a really big problem down here. Our roads are just rammed all the time.
Similar problems across the border in Devon. Ilfracombe is the most deprived area in North Devon. Twice the town has applied for levelling up funding. Twice it's been turned down, something North Devon MP Selene Saxby says is frustrating.
It's very complicated. It's not as straightforward as just throwing money at the problem. They're very deep issues. And I think, the Nick Whitty report highlighted some of the health inequalities that you see around the coast, on top of some of the property challenges. I think, stood here today in this wind, you can see just maintaining properties in areas like this is significantly harder.
For several years, the government has acknowledged that rural areas need extra help, but so far that help doesn't stretch to our coasts. The MP for St Austell and Newquay is pushing the government to change all this.
Truly local people are finding it really challenging because we often have sort of low-wage seasonal work, but very high house prices pushed up because of second homes and holiday lets, etc. And also, I think the disparity review that Theresa May carried out when she was Prime Minister highlighted that working-class white boys in coastal communities are some of the most disadvantaged people in the country.
Struggling to get on the housing ladder, struggling to find work, struggling to be heard.
It's interesting that a member of the party that's in government recognises that, which is great, because it is a really important thing. But that government, for the last 10 years, has also cut £500 million in youth services around the country. So not only have you got disaffected young men searching for community, there isn't anywhere for them to go. They're finding these communities in dark areas of the internet. That's the only place that they're finding this. And when you're disaffected and you're disillusioned, it's so much more easy to become radicalised. Imagine if we could raise all of our young men to be, look, life over the last however many thousands of years has swayed towards the benefit of, white guys. And we need to make sure that we make this a more equal and progressive society. So it's your responsibility as a young male to bring people from the LGBTQ plus community into the fold and make sure that they feel safe and heard and understood. And it's your responsibility to do the same thing with women, make sure that they feel safe and understood and heard in these discussions, and not say, there's no room for you in this conversation. We're going to speak to all of the people that it involves, which is obviously great that they have a seat. But I feel like a lot of young, white, working class lads don't feel like they have a seat at the table anymore.
No one thinks the problem of coastal deprivation can be solved overnight. The issue of disaffected young white males even harder. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Thank you for that, Jeff. I've just been looking at some of the properties in that area as well. For an 8-bedroom house, £300,000.
Bargain.
Really lovely place. I don't know why it's
overlooking the bay, the sea, the English Channel. And as a child of the seaside, I beg all governments of current and future, please do more to preserve our great British seasides. They're fantastic. And it's precisely why I refuse to live in London, because I want to stay down there.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm looking at Ilfracombe, actually. But let's see what lots of you have been saying at gbnews.com/you'll say. Of all the topics we've been discussing, Megan's talking about Starmer. She says Starmer has no idea about stopping the boats. Border Force have been active in France as far as possible. But the truth is, France is happy to take our money and make little attempt to stop the dinghies taking off. We've even seen them guiding the dinghies into British waters.
Yep, Deb, you say until we get a hardline leader who's prepared to do what needs to be done, push boats back to France, limit legal migration and ban any illegal migrants from seeking asylum, nothing will change.
It's true. If you come here that way, you shouldn't be allowed in. Phil says, regardless of what Starmer tells you about a changed Labour Party, it isn't. With no action taken over Lindsay Hoyle, Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting, besides the fact that lefties have him by the short and curlies. That's why. Trojan horse leader. That's a good point. Angela Rayner has gone quiet. Wes Streeting, some of the tweets and things he's been saying, you or I wouldn't be able to get away with that kind of nonsense. Lindsay Hoyle, that odd thing that happened, that's gone on.
I thought you were calling him an odd thing. You saw it. You saw it during COVID with Beergate.
Exactly.
Sir Keir Cormer. You know. With respect to the police and everybody who investigated that, you know, they found that he didn't break COVID rules, but it was clear for everybody.
But that police force weren't really prosecuting or giving out penalty fines for people doing that. So they actually had a slightly different way of dealing with it than London. So that's another reason why he appeared to sort of get out of that.
The Police and Crime Commissioner, I think it was in Durham, as far as I recall, was a massive Starmer ally, a Labour Police and Crime Commissioner who'd been hanging out with Angela Rayner. Nothing was done. I mean, for me...
Well, that's not to suggest that anything untoward was happening, but it does seem to speak of a great coincidence where everything was brushed under the carpet.
Boris Johnson, I'm no big fan of Boris Johnson. I think he really lost his way, yet he was done for having crusty M&S cake in Downing Street. You know, arguably he messed up with Chris Pincher and whatever else, but, you know, he was pillared. He was chased by the leftist media, by Labour. And Angela Rayner said it herself in the Commons the other day. She was speaking to Grant Shapps, or whoever it was, some Tory MP. I can't believe you got rid of your only election winner. You know, I mean, more fool the Tory MPs for doing that.
Yeah, well, listen, if you just tuned in, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Up next, 5 babies have died with whooping cough this year. We'll discuss why reports of the condition is on the rise. Stay tuned. You're with Britain's Newsroom.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fantastic Friday out there if you like warm and sunny weather. Just to note, UV levels are high across parts of the south. We haven't seen a lot of sunshine this spring. Don't get caught out. High pressure is dominating and will continue to control our weather, at least for the first part of the weekend. We do have a weather front clearing away from Shetland. Brought a bit of rain earlier and staying fairly cloudy here. Later on today, the mist and low cloud could return to parts of the coast in East Anglia, and some cloud bubbling up this afternoon over northern England. Very small chance of seeing a shower, but for the vast majority, dry, fine. Warm in the sunshine as well, widely over 20 degrees, 24, 25 degrees across the southeast, maybe even up to 26 Celsius. A fine evening to come. Again, for the vast majority, the cloud tending to, again, clear away from Shetland. But we'll see a bit more mist and low cloud returning to eastern counties of England, from Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire, across to the London area and throughout East Anglia. Likely to start a bit grey tomorrow morning. Temperatures mostly holding up in double figures, certainly in urban areas, a little lower in the countryside. On to Saturday, and yes, it could start a bit drab over eastern counties of England, but that mist and low cloud will disappear. Just the threat of it sticking to some coasts. For most, it's another sunny day on Saturday, but a greater chance of seeing 1 or 2 showers break out north of the central belt across Scotland, maybe even a thunderstorm. Vast majority, though, dry, fine, warm and sunny again.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Now, if you just tuned in, welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom. It's coming up to 11 minutes to midday. Now, this has been a big story on the front cover of the Daily Mail. 5 newborn babies have died in a spiralling whooping cough outbreak, which has terrified parents.
Almost 3,000 cases have already been recorded in 2024, triple the levels seen across the entirety of 2023. And the ever-growing outbreak is on track to be the biggest in over a decade.
I know, it's very worrying. Well, joining us now is Health and Social Affairs editor of the Sunday Express, Lucy Johnston. Lucy, thank you for joining us. What are they putting down this particular outbreak to?
Well, various experts have various theories, and it's not entirely clear, but there are some very clear problems that we've seen a declining in vaccination rates during the pandemic lockdowns. That is partly due to access problems. It was difficult to get to see your GP and bring children in, number of children in to get vaccinations. There was also fear-based messaging during that time, so maybe people were afraid of going out and about and going to visit their GPs. People were very afraid of catching COVID. And also the lockdowns themselves created a sort of what they call an immune deficit. So people weren't mixing as much, and various diseases, your immunity works on the go, and if you're not picking up infections, then you're not producing immunity to it. So that saw increases in another problem with children, other respiratory problems.
Can I just quickly ask, do we know whether these babies were vaccinated against it?
Well, these babies actually were too young to be vaccinated, but there is a maternal vaccination programme, and the number of pregnant women who, so the antibodies, the immunity is passed from the pregnant women to the babies. And so there's a programme for pregnant women to be vaccinated. And that's dropped from about 70% in 2017 to about 58% last year. So vaccination rates were already dropping before the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's not just because of that, but what we've seen in both children and adults is a drop. That drop actually it drifted down further, and there was less people getting vaccinated overall, which happened with other vaccines too. We've seen an increase in measles recently, haven't we? Which has taken public health authorities an urgent catch-up for children to be boosted with the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine, because we've seen deadly measles on the rise too.
Lucy, is it not the case that, very interesting points, by the way, saying that the vaccination rates for whooping cough were going down before COVID? Because I had a theory, and I've had first-hand experience from friends of parents of young children who just refused to get their kids vaccinated with traditional childhood jabs because all trust from the health establishment has just been blown apart after COVID. You know, arguably there were many lies told, there were mistruths, information was spun, and it's not just COVID either. We had the infected blood inquiry finishing next week. The role of the pharmaceutical companies there. General trust, I think, in pharmaceutical companies, the health establishment, the NHS, doctors, as far as I can tell, since COVID, has just been completely trashed.
Trust in public health is crucial. And during COVID, we had very confusing messages about the need to stay at home. People were silenced. And there was a whole confusion over the COVID vaccine for children, with the government's body that recommends vaccines saying it didn't recommend COVID vaccines for children, and then the chief medical officers saying that they should have it anyway, and a big push for children to have that vaccine. And as we've just seen, the AstraZeneca vaccine, COVID vaccine, has now been withdrawn. So public health should be about education,
And
support, and guidance. It should be about advice, and it should.
Okay, Lucy, thank you so much.
Along with you, but it was about fear-based messaging and a big push, and I think that has had an effect.
Thank you, Lucy. Really good to talk to you. That's Lucy Johnson. She's the editor of the Sunday Express.
Health editor.
Health editor.
Giving her a promotion there.
Did I?
Probably a big pay rise as well. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all your messages. Thank you, Nana. You're back tonight with Patrick
See you
Christie.
tonight. But
Here's
right
Tom.
now.
Well, speaking of promotions, the economy is growing. Yes, recession is over, and our very own Liam Halligan has sat down with the Prime Minister to get to the bottom of if he's going to take credit for it, or is it the graft of everyone in Britain? We've got that interview coming up, but also a solar flare, the largest in 20 years. Could it affect our GPS and internet? That and small boats. Does Labour really think it has the answer? All to come on Good Afternoon Britain.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather brought to you by the Met Office. The fine and often sunny weather many of us have had recently will continue for a little while yet. Yes, there are some mist and fog patches around first thing this morning, but these will quickly burn back because there'll be plenty of sunshine around. Lots of bright blue skies on offer as we head into the afternoon. A bit more cloud towards Shetland, a little bit of rain here, and elsewhere 1 or 2 showers possible. Most places staying dry and in the sunshine, feeling even warmer than yesterday. Highs of around 24 or 25 Celsius. Little change as we go through this evening and overnight. It is going to stay settled. A lot of the cloud will actually clear away, so clear skies for many of us, though some low cloud pushing in from the North Sea across some eastern parts, and elsewhere a few pockets of mist and fog are possible. Temperatures generally dropping to high single figures or low double digits. We start Saturday on a fine note for many places, though quite cloudy towards eastern parts. Again, any mist and fog will quickly burn back, and then once more another largely fine day for many of us. Just watch out for the potential for some showers to develop over high ground towards northern England, and some of these could be heavy. Temperatures even higher